والله من أراد العزة لأمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، من أراد النصر لأمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، من أراد نصرة المستضعفين من المسلمين، فعليه بأن يقيم التوحيد والسنة. ليست نصرة المستضعفين بكلام تستجلب فيه العواطف وتستدر به الجماهيرية، إنما نصرة المستضعفين بإقامة دين الله، أن نظهر التوحيد، أن نتمسك بالسنة. دعك من أصحاب العواطف، لا تلتفت إلى الجماهيريات ولا تخف من كلام الناس، هذا كلام الله ووعد الله صادق. إن آمنا وعملنا بالصالحات ووحدنا الله عز وجل ليمكنن الله عز وجل لنا الدين، ثم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا، ثم انظر يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا. لا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. The Noble Sheikh has some excellent advice for us on how to restore honor and victory to the Muslim community, and I have some notes here that I wanted to share with you. Now, helping the oppressed, okay? There's different types of oppression. And when you're oppressed, you really seek help, don't you? If you notice how Islam is the truth, and then you notice how innovation comes in, people won't be able to get the remedy that they are seeking because they're not going about it the right way. So imagine you broke up, your relationship ends, you got a divorce, and instead of, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, you go to some voodoo lady, right? And she just totally tells you to do things that are 100% haram. You're not going to get the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by going about that route. So when he mentions establishing Tawheed and the Sunnah, you can realize how studying the Hadith and looking at the Qur'an for evidences of remedies and rectifications, punishments, how justice is established, then misguidance will really be limited, wouldn't it? And today you have a lot of people who go about changing Islam, and this is really quite strange, especially when it comes to clothing or if music, Okay, let's do an experiment here. So you want honor and victory. How are you going to stop oppression in your community? Let's look at Mexico, for example. Mexico is trying to cut back on what the cartels are allowed to put in their music. And they don't want them mentioning drugs and women and all that sin, right? Who knows what they'll be able to do. But for us Muslims, we know creating such music is haram. But also that creating that kind is especially double haram, right? So if you have a reformist, innovating, heretical Muslim who's like, you know what, let's just unleash the music industry even further, right? Let's let them do horrendous things. Let me give you an example. There was a guy who was doing a rap music video, and he, in the background, had literal people doing what, like raw, P-O-R-N. Okay? It was uncensored, and it was like, what? So the slippery slope fallacy became true. For years, liberals mocked people, especially back then when Christians had some semblance of real conservatism. They were like, this is gonna, if you allow these lyrics and these women twerking and all these hedonistic stuff in the music videos, it's gonna get really worse. And the liberal atheists were like, you idiots, how dare you, you know? This is slippery slope fallacy. But Patreon allows this guy to make his music videos, but bans people for political speech, right? It's quite bizarre. So that guy, he's rapping in his microphone, and in the back, a U-Haul opens up, and there's people going at it. Now, it started with that 80s Eazy-E, you know, what is it, with attitude? NWA? Yeah. You had the political rap that was actually, you know, kind of catchy. And then you had the good feel rap. Well, I'm not going to just say Will Smith is like, he became anything. But like how they had their hair and it was like funky. It was different. And then it slid into Cardi B, Nicki Minaj. And you're like, what? This is crazy. Like, it went real down. Okay? Now, what does the music industry bring to your people? Well, it makes women really prone to being groupies. Because if you watch Elvis Presley, women went insane with that guy. Alright? They for a time didn't want to put the camera on Elvis Presley's legs because of the way he was gyrating and dancing. And women, you know, they would scream and fall over. And if that's your wife, you're just like, what is going on here? And then you see these rock stars, especially rock stars, okay? Yeah, rappers have it too. But rock stars, heavy metal, rock and roll, they would just have tons of women fawning over them. My dad was in a band. He played the drums. And he was really good. And he had a lot of groupies. Okay? My biological grandpa, not my step-grandpa who I've cut ties with over Palestine, because he supports the Zios. But my biological grandpa, he was also a drummer. And men who are musicians, they get women really easily, serenading them. I mean, there's something with instruments and musicians, men playing a guitar, the drums, women just go crazy. And now you've helped to spread a lot of sexual corruption. And then what do people like is further and further debauchery in their music. Think of the heavy metal song that goes, let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor. Ah! And that really gets people going. And then, for me, I think the most prime example of music that really affects me is the corridos perrones of Mexico, Los Originales de San Juan. The main singer has a voice that it's deeper. His voice is smooth like molasses. And then they do those Mexican calls like, ah, hi, 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 in the music. And they got like, da, 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 da. And like firearms going off. Like, it's really stimulating. And you're just like, whoa, like this music feels like it's taking over you. And then you look at depressing music, how that can really keep someone in a cycle. There's also the stereotype of Vicente Hernandez. He's like a romance guy. People get drunk drinking tequila in the cantina and they start crying because these romance songs. Okay. So, you know, and then there's the funeral music. You put on some Chopin and you're just like, this is depressing. You know what I mean? So, music brings a whole lot of problems with it. And how it shapes you, controls your emotions, the industry it brings, and how the stars turn more and more to occultism. You look at Katy Perry, you look at Lady Gaga and Madonna, 3 women who started off pretty normal, and then as they age, become more occultic, doing more and more strange satanic rituals in their music, and they just really become vicious people. So, if your young girls are looking up to these women, you're not going to do too well as a society. The Britney Spears effect, Hannah Montana, Lil Nas, They start off clean, and then bam, they switch to something very raunchy and dirty, thus encouraging your youth to switch up too. And it creates a lot of oppression, because the occultists and Satanism, that doesn't really lead to a lot of joy and prosperity, but a lot of envy, contrarianism, combativeness, and the disdain for children, and vanity, and the adoration of vanity. And so, if you look at the Quran, you look at the Sunnah, you would see, you're not supposed to have music in the first place. If you would have just listened, you could have avoided a lot of social ills brought on by music. Okay? Now, I get how it's hard for somebody born in America to kind of really detach from music, but I've done it pretty well. I don't seek out a song and put it on, right? It's actually become quite irritating when you go into a cafe, let's say, and they're blasting jazz or pop, and I have to talk louder in order to order my drink, and while I'm waiting there's some weird music going on, and you're just like, is this necessary? But they feel, in order to keep the workers in a light mood and not feeling like everything is so full of drudgery and monotony, they have to have that music to kind of keep you hypnotized to keep on working. And then people becomes emotionally attached and emotionally dependent upon music as their dopamine resource, as their coping mechanism for stress, to uplift them, instead of really finding more healthier and sustainable ways. And then there's lots of things on the corruption of the music industry itself. Contracts, and who controls your lyrics, and who you become a puppet for, and how you slowly lose your will. Like, there were the guys who were called the Island Boys. They tried to be, I think, artists, but they were influencers. They're twin brothers. They ended up doing really gross things with each other to stream, and then you see their mental health spiral, and they always say how they feel possessed, and they're just not in a healthy place. And you're like, you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. You look at the guy Fauci, who I think struggles with the fact that he's bisexual or gay. He wanted to be a rapper. His mom wasn't really into it, and so then he has these problems with his mom. He claims to be Muslim, but he should know that that music is haram. If he just listens, he wouldn't feel oppressed in his heart, and he wouldn't be such a mental health mess and such a burden to his mom. It's really interesting if you look at it, how it all goes. And if you look at the story of Johnny Cash, how he struggled, and music and stuff like that, even though some of his music is catchy when he's singing in Folsom Prison. And, Joaquin Phoenix played him pretty well in the Johnny Cash movie. But no matter which way you square it, music really takes over. And in the schools that I walk past sometimes, as I'm taking children to walk, when they're doing PE, they're blasting songs where I can know the lyrics, like the song, what was that guy's name? It goes, hoops with the fur, and it goes, everybody in the club was looking at her, she hit the flow, and got low. Apple bottom jeans. So what is he talking about? He's talking about a lady twerking and pop locking and dropping it, booty shaking, apple bottom jeans, or like she's got a really nice bubble butt. And there's a social aspect to the large hoop earrings where, like, in high school, those were the girls that were fast girls. They were girls who had lost their virginity, probably already had 6, 7, 8 men they slept with, and their boyfriend was like 20 years old. There was a stigma of those kind of girls historically. I saw this when I lived in Philadelphia. Puerto Rican girls would have those big hoop earrings, and then their name in cursive in the loops, and those girls had some of them, many of them, unfortunately, had babies out of wedlock, and they're in high school. You'd see them with their babies. And so it's sad that children are listening to lyrics that they don't 100% understand, but that's putting that sort of imagery and that tune and that beat in their mind. Then when they get older and they realize what that song was talking about is inappropriate for school. But no matter, and when you look at 8 Mile, the soundtracks, right? Mom spaghetti, vomit on her sweater already, blah 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 blah, on his sweater already. Eminem. I remember when he was getting really popular and his lyrics were really dark. And now you look at him, he did one photo shoot where he was in a bathtub full of blood. And you're like, what? So no matter which way you square it, these artists go off the rails. Okay? And when people smoke weed or get high, the type of music they puts them into a hypnotic effect. It's like if you look at shamans, the drums, and then you take ayahuasca or peyote and then or mushrooms, and they guide you on this sort of journey so that you have a good trip, but the beat of the drum can really get it going. I mean, I'm okay at the hand deerskin drum, so I know what they're talking about when they do this. But you can get like a heartbeat going and you literally feel it in your chest. There's something about bass that really gets a person's blood pumping. You can play the drums and a child will start dancing. It really does something. So the musicians become really grand misguiders in the culture. Okay? And if you just would have listened to the rules of Islam, you wouldn't have had this problem with rap, rock and roll, R&B, death metal, all that stuff. You wouldn't have had it. Marilyn Manson, Cardi B. Yeah. You just would have cut it off. You would have never allowed that tree to grow. But people don't listen. So how can you have honor when the dishonorable are promoted? How can you have spiritual victory when you have musicians who are very emotive? They're very good at rhetoric and lyrics. You know, you can't. Now, when he was talking about like emotional rhetoric, it made me think of Frenzy and you know, a good orator. What was her name? Victoria Gomez? I forgot. She's a Republican Latina, and remember I shared on the community tab on my main channel, Law Officer's Corner, how she was saying like she's like against Islam and stuff, but she has a persona of being very masculine, soldier-esque type of a woman. And she made that video when there were some problems in Syria between the Muslims and Christians, right? Now, these MAGA Christians, they're really good at emotional rhetoric. So are some of the liberals and the communists. Okay? But my point, I'm going to use this example, is she was rallying up her audience to take action, even though she's not going to be the one to carry out the action. And I pointed out how a lot of Christian MAGA influencers will make calls to violence, calls to action that they will not participate in, but you'll be in jail. And the prime example of that, January 6th, the Capitol. It was, when you first saw it, you're like, this seems like a crazy, rambunctious riot, what a joke. But what else is there? We know that there were some federal agents there. We know it was a way to get a lot of people arrested. But the influencers who riled up the people into a frenzy. Look at Tim Pool. He's always saying civil war, civil war. It's very satanic and Luciferian. He's trying to manifest a civil war. He has money. One of the payments he got on X was $60,000. I shared the screenshot. He was bragging. Okay? He makes bank. He hides this by wearing a dandruff stinky beanie and dressing like he's 14 to hide his real age. Because if he took off his hat, you would see his gray hairs, you would see, you know, his balding. Nothing wrong with being bald, but you would just see the age, is my point. And he doesn't do that. So he's kind of in a permanent stage of Peter Pan type of energy. But he's always mentioning Civil War, and getting you... I noticed when I cut off listening to some of his videos for a while, I didn't have such tense stress in my chest, you know? And then I realized, like, oh, Tim is really good at getting you stressed out, angry, and afraid, and being a walking hypocrisy to what he preaches, because he claims to be a liberal, but then preaches conservative values, you know? Back when he didn't even have a kid, he just had a kid, he's not even 1 year old. And he's an atheist, he's not a Christian. But he rails against Islam, gets paid by the Jays, and pushes Christian MAGA stuff. So he's all over the map. But my point is that he tries to get people hyped up to pop off. Now, think about a person in your friend group. Just imagine you had a friend like this who every time you guys go out, he's always trying to start something, but he doesn't finish it. That person you wouldn't really trust anymore, because when push comes to shove, they don't got your back, but they start the drama. A lot of influencers and activists, they want to be popular with strong rhetoric, but they don't. They just talk about it. They don't be about it. That's a cultural phrase we have in America. And it's all smoke and mirrors and chest thumping and bluffing. It isn't real, because people who are really about their business, they do it quietly. Think about the heavy pushers in the world. Ones will never know. They're in the shadows. They're not in the forefront, letting you know they're the puppet master. The really scary assassins, they're not in the street with Glocks doing music videos talking about what they're going to do to you. They just get the order, carry out the hit, and they're back in Sweden or Norway or wherever the hell they're from. Okay? You will never even know they were there. That's how slick they are. Okay? Makes me think of the investors in the Netflix show Gangs of New York. I mean, not Gangs of New York. That was with Leonardo DiCaprio. Gangs of London. There's these people called the investors. Okay, they're so high up and they have all these different assassination teams. And you're like, wow, that's intense. But you'll never know these assassins. They're not on social media saying, hi, I'm an assassin. I'm so tough. I'm so scary. And if you think about the really scary people, they're not going to reveal who they are and what they do because they don't want to go to jail. Right? And so, when someone is getting increasingly popular for something, you always got to check, is this a psyop? Is this person a plant? An agent? What do they call, what's the other word? Controlled opposition. That's it. Because eventually, you got to wonder, like, what is the intention? You know? Have they suffered? And are they real? Because if Allah blesses you with getting some popularity, that's wonderful. But some people will use their popularity against the people. And a lot of emotional rhetoric will help you rise to the top. You'll see that a lot. People will talk about the war in Yemen, or they'll talk about the poor people of Ghana, or the poor people of Kenya. They'll talk about babies getting the Zika virus in Brazil. Which is important to raise awareness, but you wonder, like, what else are you doing? You know, what else are you doing to help things become better in the world? Because a lot of talk and a lot of fiery speeches in front of a crowd as they clap. Okay, you got to do some action, though. So, you know, you got to do something that you can. If you're just driving around giving speeches and raising money, and you're not putting that money to work except to get you a nice car and a good house, then what are you really doing? You're kind of just on a talking tour. You're just like a parrot that's put on the shoulders of your masters, and you squawk it, and then you just get your little Pollyanna cracker. It's not really real. So when he talks about, the Shaykh talks about not getting manipulated by the super class masters of rhetoric and the people who are super duper popular. Think about all the people who are popular, but they spread corruption. And they encourage you to do behaviors that they won't be there. They're not going to bail you out of jail. They're not going to pay for your lawyers. They're not going to feed your family when you're rotting in the cell. And a lot of that is wartime stuff. There's a real time for war. And then there's a time where someone is being suspect. You know? You see this a lot with gang people. And you're like, well, why don't you do it? And they're like, yeah, we have to do this. We gotta do this. And then you're like, when was the last time this guy put in any work? And then you realize who got to live long was because they weren't going on the missions they sent others to. Political rhetoric in America, especially from, like, the liberals will say the sky is falling. They'll say fascism and authoritarianism is around the corner. And they always have been saying that for, like, years. And they may have a point, but I'm just saying that's their emotional thing they go to. And the Republicans will be like, oh, Sharia law is coming, this guy is falling. But they'll never talk about lowering your taxes, fixing interest rates, fixing pollution, doing reforestation, you know, things that'll actually help the people. They just have a boogeyman and then scare the masses, right? And so you see how those people, they'll get really frightened, then they're easier to guide. Because they're afraid and they want, help us, help us, help us. And then they don't really have solutions besides fleecing you out of money or taking away your rights. Okay? So I really saw what he meant there. Okay? And when you look to the Qur'an and Sunnah and check that against someone's popularity status, be like, hey, you may be popular, you made a mistake on this, but I'm not going to do what you say. Like, let's look at Andrew Tate and Sneeko. They party with bimbos and hoes, but they have things in the Islamic community that they care about. And they can get some men being black-pilled on women. Same with the radical feminists and the feminist hijabis, right? They can make rhetoric about polygamy or about what men in marriage are entitled to concerning intimacy, and they reject the Quran and Sunnah, and then they just make up their own liberal rhetoric. And then this makes the women angry, frustrated, and now they're these empowered boss babes, and then the home breaks apart, right? And so you can see so many different examples in the Muslim community if we stick to keeping things cool. We stick to keeping it straight lined, okay? Now he's mentioned, establishing the authentic religion of Islam. If someone's introducing, like, you have to wear red shoes on Monday, and you're like, where's that written? Just you saying, where is that written, instead of saying, I blindly believe you. Bam. You're keeping truth alive. You're keeping authenticity flowing. Right? And so, he mentions further, not to fear the speech of the people, because ridicule is powerful. And the more you get ridiculed, sometimes you mess up and you deserve a little bit of roasting. But for the most part, there's going to be people who will say stuff like, when I argue with the feminists, they'll say like, oh, you're wearing a tablecloth. You look like a Pac-Man spook, like the Pac-Man retro game. Or, different things. And you're like, sometimes you want to throw a little bit of salt back in the eye. But if you don't let them distract you and you stick to the matter at hand, it's more potent, okay? And that disturbs a lot of women because when women start to argue, the first thing they go for is the jugular. Looks, and then intelligence. That's the number 2 things. Oh, well, you must be stupid if you don't agree with me. Oh, well, you must be a pick-me-sha. Like, they attack your intelligence and your clothing and your looks first before the argument. And if you fear that type of ridicule, then you'll let them dominate you, and then the Muslims will become oppressed. But if you hold firm and you're like, no, you can call me whatever you want, let's stick to the subject. Having that thick skin, which builds over time. It's not just given to you, right? I remember one sheikh talked about how someone spat on him, and he said, like, oh, spit is pure, because there's impurities, and then there's things that if they get on you, it's pure. And he was just so stoic and was like, oh, it's pure. It's not urine or feces or sperm. Spit, not a big deal. Me, I would be like, oh, well, it's going down. But see, those people, they've gotten to such a level of unbothered that you can't get under their fingernails so easy. And that takes time. The more people engage with salty, rabid-mouthed people who are just very visceral against Islam, I think you toughen up if you don't let it get to you. What I've done a couple times, like, there was a person who said, like, oh, look, another hijabi supporting ISIS. Oh, you don't have a BOMB under your clothing there? And I was like, if I did, would you give me a hug? Like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I flipped it on them. Oh, someone said, don't you have an honor killing to go to? I said, oh, yeah, I do. You want to come with me at 4 o'clock? You know? Like, and some people might be like, oh, don't say that. But it flips their insult on their head, and it adds satire and a little bit. Now, you have to watch satire. It can go off the heels. But what I mean by that is the snarky, backhanded comments. Sometimes you can give them a taste of their own medicine. You don't want to go off the rails. But it's not like it's going to totally make you spiral out and make you mad for days, is my point. And you're still able to focus at the matter at hand. Right? And so, not fearing the speech of the trolls or the naysayers or the foaming at the mouth Christians and the bloated, snarky atheists, this can go a long way. It really can. It really can. Because the whole point is to get honor and victory to the Muslims. Look to the Qur'an and Sunnah. This takes time as well. It's not easy. Especially for moms. Okay? You're tired, you're exhausted, you got so much to do. And you're like, wow. At the end of the day, a guy comes home from work. He just wants to rest his eyes. He starts reading, starts feeling drowsy, falls asleep. He does what he can, right? But oppression comes from so many different routes. So in order to eradicate it, if we look to what can cause oppression, bad dealings in business. Islam has rules, the fiqh of business, fiqh al-haya, okay, how you're supposed to dress and how women are supposed to be. Honor. How are women supposed to be honored if they're not honorable? So how does Islam honor women, and how are women supposed to behave in order to preserve honor and spiritual victory in the land? Occultist women depend upon women showing their beauty. And in a culture that enforces monogamy but has sexual hedonism, how is that supposed to work? If you have brothels, strip clubs, PORN is available everywhere for free. How are men supposed to, like, that's really difficult. That's super difficult. So you punish men with monogamy, like, okay, you can't have other wives, but then you surround them with temptations. What? You can't have a second, third, fourth wife, but you can go get a massage at a massage parlor. You can go to certain states and watch women go on a pole. And you're just like, so this is legal, but you can't have a wife. What's going on here? And so they've normalized adultery and fornication over marriage. It's really quite crazy. And then the women get oppressed, because once they've been divorced and have 2 kids or 3 kids, it's harder for them to get a childless man to commit to them without him eradicating his bloodline if she's not going to give him more kids, right? But if a man has resources, like he's like a Dan Bilzerian, he can afford to have 4 wives and take on a good pious sister who has children who are a bit of a financial baggage. He can afford it with ease, and she doesn't have to go work 40, 50 hours a week, barely making ends meet and being on food stamps, feeling depressed inside because she's in the rat race again when she wants to just be home with her babies, be home with her children, and have a more peaceful existence. A man can provide that with resources. But if you only allow the wealthy man to have 1 woman, well then a lot of women get left out. And I know women will say, well, he can give charity. Do women give a lot of charity to other women? Not really. But if a hot guy was like, I need $20 for gas, they'll be like, here you go. It's the truth. Okay, women are more stingy with giving other women money, and if a woman is more attractive than a woman, there's a lot of jealousy there, she's going to hold back. Women are more vindictive and catty than we like to admit sometimes. A man will be like, you look good, I'm attracted to you, here's some money, be with me. It's so easy. Whereas more of when a woman is there, it's like, there has to be, oh, you must be very desperate in order to need it. Oh, you have to beg me. There's more strings attached when a woman gives money. And I know someone will tell me something like, oh, well, there's domestic violence shelters, a lot of women help and volunteer. Yeah, that's one example. But women are way more stingy with their money when it comes to others. I really do see that. And if women weren't as stingy, why is there so many poor single moms? Why aren't all the feminists coming together, creating compounds and doing that? Women, they turn to creating an OnlyFans account to get money from men to show their boobs versus going to women and saying, help me. So when women need money, they turn to men first before turning to other women. Why is that? Ask yourself. Okay? And establishing, it's halal for a man to have 4 wives he treats justly. Okay? And that protects the private parts. When you have a bunch of single women who can't get a guy, they turn to trying to poach another woman's man in a monogamous system. And then the man struggles heavily with guarding his eyes when you don't have dress codes. And men who their wife may be pregnant, she's may not looking good, or she's probably ill, she just had a surgery, she's just not looking fly. And then here comes a woman barely wearing anything, who's super easy, super fast. This is a huge temptation. And then he's evil if he falters, but the women who do that are empowered. Boss babe, feminist, progressives. Doesn't make any sense. So for the liberals, sex workers are empowered, but men are pigs and disgusting because they watch the material and pay for it. So if you look at what Islam says, don't let that industry, this shouldn't be allowed. And men can have 4 wives they treat justly, and then the whole conversation about concubinism is another angle. But Islam has halal ways that help, when done right, that can help people not become pimped out or trafficked and resort to selling their bodies to get by when they can get remarried. You see what I'm saying? So, great points from the Sheikh, and some people can forget how important Tawheed is. Don't worship the stars. Don't look to numerology. Like, think about, how does Islam contend you get money? Well, we know that some of us will never have money, and that's just the way it is. But don't be a beggar. Remember Riyadh Salihin Volume 1 and Volume 2, they both have mentionings of, not begging. Earning, it's better for you to gather wood and sell it for firewood than to always pester people and beg, right? So, to be honest in your dealings in business as well, Islam has a bunch of stuff. But if the society is allowing too much scammers, like, look at Rumble. Rumble and X have scam ads. So does Google. But scam ads. Why is there no regulation about this? These ads are fake. There's not a real vetting system to make sure what's going on is true. And like, I saw a commercial today on Rumble that said turmeric will help you to lose weight, and Ozempic, that thing that everyone's using to lose weight, wanted to sue a company making turmeric because it was competing with their profit. And that's just not true. It's totally fake. And they were just trying to sell turmeric. And you're like, why is this type of fake clickbait ads allowed? Right? Why is it allowed? Why is there no regulatory body making sure what's being sold is accurate? Snake oil salesman, what's going on here? Right? In Islam, we have ethics. We're not allowed to deceive the customer. And we're rewarded when we are honest with the customer. And if there is a defect, be straightforward and mention it. And to be good in our business dealings, not to earn money the crooked way. And so, when reminding people not to turn to crime is important, and then providing them a legitimate source of income to help them not be tempted to join the bandwagon of scamming, hacking, crime, stuff like that. So there's a lot of great points in just pointing out to people to return to Tawheed. Just look at the cartels. Remember a little while ago I showed you, and this is still images of how the cartels have a lot of shirk. They contend to be Catholic, and Catholics pretend that the cartels aren't, but the facts are right there. They have churches, there's crosses, and Jesus is everywhere. They are their own cult, their own niche faction of Christianity. And you can takfir, we call it the word takfir, but the Christians can say that's a heretical sect all they want. But the point is those cartel people mix occultism with Christianity, and they innovated. They strayed from what the Bible actually says, okay? And they have different things they do in order to keep the money flowing in the cartels from their perspective, right? Statues that they go and put money in front of, flowers in front of, food in front of, you name it. It's really bizarre. And us as Muslims, if we don't follow the Christians' idea of let's make idols and do weird rituals that have no basis in the Qur'an and Sunnah, we'll be more safe, inshallah. Because every innovation is misguidance, so we're not going to get nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through misguidance. So, by sticking to the Qur'an and Sunnah, we'll be rightly guided. To be rightly guided, we'll get nearness to Allah. The more nearer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the better your life's going to be. Inshallah. The more you stray from Allah, the more lost you are. So, reminding people consistently not to commit shirk, to worship Allah alone, to do righteous deeds, to refrain from bad deeds, to stick to the fiqh issues, how they should be. This helps. It's a lot to learn. It's a long process. It can feel overwhelming. But if we all are trying, this keeps the momentum up and keeps people motivated. Right? No matter how hard life gets. And so many great points to think about, and you could go on and think about even more. But it's a good reminder. It's simple when you first look at it. But when you actually extract out and you're like, okay, he said this, now let's go here. Let's go here. Well, could it be this? Could it be that? We get more of a picture and you're like, ah, yeah. Okay, it's like we're putting together a puzzle. And I really enjoyed that. And these sheikhs are filled with quite a lot of wisdom. And I appreciate what they do. I really do. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And join the blog. Do it now.